Welcome to Frontline Foam. I'm Derek, and today we're going to be talking about HPA. HPA Nerf is super awesome. It's super popular in the UK or overseas because they have private fields they play on, but in the US, HPA is less common, partially because the components for the HPA builds were made by Spectre. He's a hobbyist in the community because of Spectre Armaments. Spectre has done HPA cores and got them manufactured for many years now. Ourselves, Frontline Foam, have been doing HPA since back in the day. But since the cores are hard to get, a lot of people try to make their own or 3D print theirs, and you can do it. There's just a lot of work that goes into getting the materials to make an HPA build. And so a huge bottleneck of HPA has been the availability of the components. However, we're excited that we're going to be able to get more HPA cores to make HPA builds. And this should be an ongoing thing that we're able to do by working through Spectre and other manufacturers. We're going to be able to revamp HPA because HPA is fun and it is high powered. We're making this video because Spectre is doing another batch of these HPA cores, and they are going to be the sniper core, which means you are now able to build your HPA blaster. Whether it be a kind of like an Uzi style Waymaker, a more Milsim style Neutrino, or a sci-fi style Tempest, or a bullpup Axiom, you can then have various different builds. You can even design your own around that core, and you have an all-in-one system that all you need is then some air fittings, and then you can build a high FPS, high rate of fire blaster. And so we are going to have these cores already bought and paid for. They're on their way to the shop. They should be here around end of March. Hopefully they actually get here in time. If not, then whenever the time this video is released, hopefully you'll have more information. But now that we have the cores going to be back in stock, you guys can check out some high FPS builds you may want to use in your next event that you can then tune up and down. So really cool designers have made these builds, and we're excited to see what the community does now that we have more cores available. There have been people who tried to make cores before, but there is some fine tuning and machining, and the margins aren't that great because there's so many components and labor that goes involved and all that stuff. And people in the community, in the hobby community, typically try to find good budget builds. And I think that's a great thing to do. But with HPA, you don't want to go too budget because then you could have a pressure tank, made out of plastic, and that could be a bad thing. But these are solid metal, ready to go, a turnkey system that you can turn any blaster into a semi-auto or full auto with some electronics, high FPS blaster. You may ask why, what is HPA? It stands for high pressure air, which means your blaster is powered by air. Instead of by flywheels or springs that you compress, the compressed air then propels the darts. HPA is really cool because that allows you to do high power up to 300 FPS or higher and have a high rate of fire. Most builds are semi-auto, but I'm using a simple air tank. You could get something that's bolt action or pump action, but semi-auto is what you can do with the cores that are made by Spectre that Frontline Foam has sold in the past. Every batch Spectre has done, we've been a retailer of those batches, and in this batch, there's going to be a new sniper core. This is a super core. But the new cores are going to be what he has worked on as called the sniper core. This is something he's worked quite a while on, and the difference is that a super core is normally bolt closed. So when you pull the trigger, it fires and resets. So the bolt is normally closed, but the new core is going to have bolt normally open. So when you pull the trigger, it then extends, fires, and then retracts. Technology is improving. With that being said, HPA is a really easy way to get high FPS with a semi-auto rate of fire and some electric builds. You can even use relays to get full auto for high FPS and no need to prime your blaster. So it's kind of like an AEB, like a Sweetheart Storm. So it's high FPS and spring powered, but HPA is high FPS air powered. The nice thing about that is it's generally cheaper. Once you get the core, you can build any blaster and then you can swap the core between them. And total cost, depending on what setup you have for the blaster itself, you're looking at $150 or $200. With the core included, you're maybe looking at more like $250 or $300, but that's still several $100s cheaper than a high FPS AEB. If you want to go like mid or low FPS, then you could probably just use a spring power blaster or a cheaper AEB. But if you're going for high FPS, HPA is the way to go for the quick cycling. You plug in your line into your blaster, you set your regulator to a pressure, then you install the air component hoses together, and then you activate your air, and you're ready to go. Then you put this on your back or your pouch or whatever you have, or if your blaster has one, you can put it on a built-in on the blaster. This is called a remote line setup, so the air is remote from the blaster, and then you're good to go. You can adjust the pressure. That's the other good thing about HPA is with just increasing or decreasing our pressure, which almost everything has a built-in option to do that already, you can increase or decrease your FPS. Now, there is a certain range where higher pressure air performs best, but you can dial this down all the way down to like 150 FPS or all the way up to 300 without having to change your setup. So it's even easier than a Springer or a flywheeler, generally speaking. And then you've got your very satisfying sound. You can see the benefit of 300 FPS, and depending on the AEB, it's even faster than a normal AEB. A full auto enough for you? So this one is an electro-pneumatic solenoid, meaning it doesn't depend on your trigger pressure to fire, it's totally electronic. So you can get your, you can actually see it up here too, little jam door here. And 3 of these were actually made by Nerfers in your very own community from the UK. And that just tells you, I went to Foam Fest, UK, high FPS. They dominate the field. It's very scary how effective those are using HPA. The super cores normally bolt closed. So to put a mag in, you have to pull the trigger, then put in a mag, which is totally fine, but this adds like one more step you don't have to do to other blasters. But the sniper core will be normally bolt open. So that way, when you fire it, when you pull the trigger, it'll actually cycle. And then when you let go of the trigger, it'll return. And so it's just the inverse. But hey, technology has gotten better over the years. That's one of the biggest complaints about HPA is that bolt open, bolt close, but now that's been solved. One disclaimer is you do have a different propulsion method than a Springer. Your air volume and your speed of delivery is different than in a Springer where you have a compressed spring that you fire and then it builds up pressure, dart goes down the barrel. This is a different system where it's a little bit more instantaneous air release. And so your barrel lengths and tightness and optimal settings might be a little different. So it is a different kind of setup you have to get used to, but you can definitely get these dialed in to be accurate. And we can help you do that because we're gonna do, we do that development here in the shop. We don't just say, hey, here's a product, buy it and then use it. We say, here's how you use it, here's how you can set it up. And there's plenty of gurus out there in the HPA Nerf community that are very well versed in their craft, such as Andrew Atchison, Pete Thomas, Daniel Polkop. Shout out to them. They've, as far as I can tell, have pioneered the HPA scene, being in the UK and using HPA on private paintball and airsoft fields. But that being said, there's plenty of support out there for you to dive into your own HPA build. And we're really excited because, again, HPA, semi-auto, it's just fun. Let me just shoot a couple more darts. Apparently I do need more mags. You're talking like 300 plus FPS performance. Put a beat car on this, you can do a long barrel length, and then you've got darts loaded backwards, but you've got the accuracy and power. Yeah, you have to carry a tank and it's heavy, but in comparison, that's actually not as bad as like a 6-pound blaster, like a Sweetheart Storm or something. And so yeah, the Sweetheart Storm is great, you should still get one. It's a lot more lightweight. Even with the tank, you can get a carbon fiber tank, yeah, it costs another $150. But altogether, this is still lighter than like, Sweetheart Storm or those other builds. And so you've got your high FPS performance, your high rate of fire, and then you can dial in for high accuracy. Downside to HPA is you do have the air component, which you will then consume as you fire, you then use air. And so you'd have to refill your tank. So it's one more thing to think about. But if you have any local airsoft, paintball stores, or even scuba or swim shops, they can fill your tanks. You can even get a compressor online. That way you can fill your own tanks. It may take a little longer to fill, but you could still be able to fill your tanks before a game. And you can even get compressors that connect to your car battery and then you can fill it wherever you are. But anyway, other than the air, there's really not any other downsides to HPA other than the price, because the only other, I guess, con of HPA is it does scare some people, the general public, when they hear loud shooting sounds. It's kind of scary. But again, that's kind of the nature of the hobby that we're in with shooting stuff. If you're going high powered, you're probably going to be playing in a place, or should be playing in a place that you've already verified that you are okay to play in. At our local park I was using HPA. We had a police officer come by and see what we were doing. And he saw we were shooting Nerf darts and he said, oh no, that's fine. The only other con is because people are kind of scared of HPA that there are some places, such as maybe New York City or some places in California, where they do have a more of a darker gray area in, is it legal to use? The answer is yes, but the cop coming to your door may not necessarily know that, because generally they keep the peace. They don't necessarily, first and foremost, keep the law. I respect our officers and I appreciate what they do, but a lot of times those laws are a lot different, because there are no laws against air-powered Nerf blasters, but there are laws against air-powered paintball markers, or other words they use, like paint markers. Yeah, they call them paint markers. And so there are laws against those, but they're not against foam blaster air-powered. And so look up your local laws, and if you're in a place that doesn't allow it, that's too bad. But I know Australia, UK, here in Utah, every place I've been to other than one place in California has been okay with it. So be smart, be responsible. That's one thing about HPA, is because it does sound scarier, then you may have to be a little more careful. But if you're playing responsibly, which if you are in the Nerf scene already and you're familiar with our content, you should be doing that anyway, because we always say, you know, be responsible, because yeah, they are toys, but yeah, they do shoot things. So be safe, be smart, but it's not as scary as you think it is. Most people are scared because they don't know about it. That's what I thought when I first got into it too. I didn't know anything. Really loud, it makes your ears ring, but that's the most dangerous it is. So you're more dangerous getting shot in the eye with a Nerf dart than playing with HPA. And I know, because I've literally played with HPA. The biggest concern that we have with HPA that we hear is that it's unsafe, because you're dealing with a pressurized component. However, all of the pressurized components are going to be machined to withstand the load, and there's safeties built in. Like these valves here, if you get too much pressure or there's something wrong, you will then vent. It'll be a loud sound, but it won't be dangerous. The extra air will just escape. So the most dangerous thing that could happen is maybe you break your airline, but again, a professional grade airline is rated for very high pressure. But if you do end up getting a cut in the line, then you have air leaking out and the hose may be moving around, but it's not really that dangerous. HPA is safer than you may think. And we know, because we've been using HPA for years now and haven't had any problems. We have had regulators fail. We have had air hoses break. We have had blasters, like the pressure breaks in the line and then damages a 3D print, but nothing has happened. Hasn't been dangerous. Hopefully that addressed your concerns. If you have other questions, you can reach out to us about HPA. If you aren't sure about HPA or want to learn more about it, we have lots of resources on our site. Like we said, in years past, we've done HPA, so we have some content out there that you can look up, and hopefully this video gives you an overview of what HPA is. If you're interested in learning more, like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. We'll put out a ton of content in the next coming months and in the future to come, because HPA is gonna just keep growing as the Nerf scene grows. Check out the Sniper Core and the Super Core and other HPA builds. Check out the link in the description where you can get your HPA parts to build your blaster, and we will be releasing the Sniper Core as well. So sign up to get notified and check out the site below. Keep nerfing, guys.